The reading. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. It is hidden but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God. The story. In the mountain town of Longquan, where iron veins ran deep beneath the earth and the rivers carried the faint taste of copper, there lived a swordsmith named Zhao Fengli. He was not merely skilled, he was consumed. For 30 years he had devoted himself to a single obsession, forging the perfect blade. His forge burned day and night, casting an amber glow against the stone walls of his workshop. The air was always thick with the scent of molten iron, charcoal smoke, and quenching oil. The rhythmic clang of his hammer against the anvil echoed through the valley like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. And he had come close, terrifyingly close. His swords were legendary. Generals rode from distant provinces to commission them. Each blade was folded hundreds of times, polished to a mirror finish so pure that a man could see his own soul reflected in the steel. The edges were so sharp they could split a silk scarf drifting through the air. He etched elaborate dragons and phoenixes into every fuller, inlaid gold into every guard, and wrapped every handle in the rarest rayskin and braided silk. But it was never enough. Each completed sword revealed to his eyes alone some invisible flaw, a microscopic ripple in the grain, a balance point off by a hair's width. And so he would begin again, heating, folding, hammering, grinding, chasing a perfection that moved further away with every strike of his hammer. His hands were a map of burns. His back was bent from decades hunched over the anvil. His wife had long since stopped asking him to come to bed. His son, now a young man, had stopped asking to learn the craft, tired of being told his work was never good enough. One evening, during the plum rain season, a traveler appeared at the edge of his forge. She was an old woman, small and unhurried, carrying a sword wrapped in undyed cloth. Rain dripped from the brim of her bamboo hat and hissed where it struck the hot stone floor. She unwrapped the bundle and placed the weapon on his workbench without a word. Zhao looked down at it. It was the plainest sword he had ever seen. No engraving, no inlay, no ornament. The blade was short and slightly thick with a gentle, almost dull curve. The handle was wrapped in simple cotton cord, darkened with age. It had no guard to speak of, just a flat disc of unpolished bronze. He almost laughed. "What is this?" he asked. "It is a sword that has never broken," the old woman said. Zhao picked it up. It was lighter than he expected. He turned it in the firelight, examining the steel. There were no fold lines visible, no mirror finish. The edge, when he tested it against his thumb, was firm but not razor sharp. It would not split silk in the air. "This blade is dull," he said, almost offended. "Yes," she replied, settling onto a wooden stool as though she had always belonged there. "That is why it has survived. A blade too sharp cheaps at first contact with bone. A blade too hard shatters against stone. A blade too beautiful makes its wielder afraid to use it." She paused, watching the rain fall beyond the open door. "You have spent your life adding to your swords. More folds, more polish, more decoration. Tell me, Zhao Fengli, when was the last time you made a sword that someone could actually carry into battle without fearing they would ruin it?" The question struck him harder than any hammer blow. He looked around his workshop. Dozens of his finest swords hung along the walls, gleaming and untouched. They were too precious to use, too perfect to risk. They had become ornaments. Beautiful, yes, but hollow in their purpose. The old woman gestured to her plain blade. "This sword has been carried by 4 generations of my family. It has cut rope, cleared brush, defended a farmhouse, and been buried in mud. It has been sharpened on river stones and dried by campfires. It is not beautiful, but it has lived." She wrapped the sword again in its cloth slowly. the way one folds a letter to a loved one. The Tao does not try to be sharp, she said quietly. That is why nothing can dull it. It does not try to shine. That is why its light never fades. It remains empty, unfilled with the need to be more than what it is. And because of this, it endures before all things. Zhao stood motionless for a long time after she vanished into the rain. The forge crackled and popped. Somewhere outside, a nightjar called across the wet darkness. The next morning, his son found him at the anvil, but something was different. The steel on the anvil was not being folded 500 times. The blade taking shape was not slender or ornate. It was simple, modest, strong. His son watched from the doorway. "Come," Zhao said, without turning around. "I will teach you to make a sword that can be used." It was the first invitation he had ever offered. The interpretation. This is the living heart of chapter 4. When Laozi says the Tao is like an empty vessel, used yet never filled, he is describing a kind of power that does not depend on accumulation. Zhao's greatest swords were full of technique, full of beauty, full of ego, and precisely because of that fullness, they were useless. They could not fulfill the very purpose for which a sword exists. It blunts the sharp. The old woman's blade had survived generations because it was not razor thin. Its dullness was its resilience. It unties the tangled. Zhao's obsession had knotted his craft, his family, and his peace into an impossible web. Only by releasing his need for perfection could the threads fall free. It softens the bright. His mirror-polished masterpieces blinded him to the simple truth that purpose matters more than brilliance. And Laozi's final mystery, it seems to have existed before the Creator, echoes in the woman's sword. That blade was not remarkable. It carried no name, no legend, and yet it outlasted everything forged with ambition. It was, in its plainness, something close to eternal. The modern practice. Now bring this into your own forge, your daily life. First, build things that can be used, not just admired. You may be pouring weeks into a project, a presentation, a creative work, polishing it endlessly, terrified to release it because it is not yet perfect. Stop. A sword that never leaves the wall is not a sword. A project that never sheeps is not a project. Let your work be a little rough. Let it enter the world with scratches on its blade. That is not failure. That is function. Second, let your edges be soft enough to last. You may pride yourself on being sharp, quick-witted, brutally honest, relentlessly driven. But sharpness without restraint destroys relationships and burns you out. The sharpest people often shatter first. Practice being slightly less cutting in your words, slightly less rigid in your expectations. You will find that softness is not weakness. It is the reason some things survive and others do not. Third, pass on what is simple, not what is perfect. Like Zhao, you may be withholding your knowledge from others because you feel it is not yet refined enough to share. Your children, your colleagues, your friends, they do not need your perfection, they need your presence. Invite someone to stand beside you at your anvil. Teach them the basic strike, the fundamental form. The most enduring legacy is not a flawless masterpiece locked behind glass. It is a simple skill, placed gently into open hands. Emptiness is not absence, it is the space where everything begins. This has been chapter 4 of the Dao De Jing. In the next video, we will explore the second chapter and put everything into a story and simple interpretation for daily lives. Click on the next video if you want to find out more about the philosophy of Dao De Jing.